Hello, hello. Happy Sunday and welcome back to the Upset Podcast. We are live and in the place and ready for some great dialogue. And by we, you know who I'm talking about. I'm talking about the crew. Hey, everybody.
Happy Sunday,
Hello.
family.
Happy Sunday, everybody.
Seems like we were just here. Just the
I
other
know,
day.
right? These weeks go by so quickly, don't they?
Oh my goodness.
But no, this is great. I hope everybody has had a great weekend so far. I know we have a celebrity amongst us. I know Charles and I were at an event yesterday, where we had the privilege of hearing Sir Tally and Generations. I realized you guys have a new name, Generations. Oh, yes, he did.
Oh, he did a solo. Were they in concert? Or
he hit the high note, he hit a note. I was like, Tally? Okay.
There was a bee that stung me at the time. Other than that note does not get hit. It is, for those, it is a group of 5 serving pastors, including also Bassett from Germantown Church. But the other ministers, we're interdenominational. Pastor Alan Waller of Enon Tabernacle Baptist Church, Pastor Chico Robinson of Truth Church here in the city of Philadelphia. I believe that's Church of God in Christ. And then Pastor Buster Fields, who's the pastor of the Ambassador Seed of Love Church. I believe they're apostolic. And Pastor Fields was the one who got on the pogo stick in one of those songs where he was going jumping up and down.
Oh yeah,
he's our youngest member, and so I told him I'm saving my energy.
So Tally, did you guys do like a half a concert? How many songs?
We just did 3 songs and a coda. It got good to the people. So
yeah, it was awesome. I was happy to be there, and
I want to thank Pastor Emil Peeler for having that community day in Washington, D.C.
Nice.
The Mitchell family down there were very kind. And so it was just the folks from Capitol Hill were extraordinary hosts, Elder Cox and the others. It was just a lot of fun. And, it was a privilege to be able to do it.
Yeah, we'll be sharing some clips from it, everybody. We'll be sharing
very good.
And some of the music that we heard there.
Oh, gosh.
Are we showing clips today?
No.
No, we'll save that. We'll save we have to build up the anticipation.
We need to shock him and show them today.
And and because we always like to promote Anthony Daniels at DC, that's right.
In the house.
Because we like to promote self-care and rejuvenation here on this show, we do want to shout out our co-host who's not here due to his vacation, Pat. We hope you're enjoying yourself wherever you are.
Who knew he needed a vacation, right? Who knew?
But no. So what else, guys? What else? Pat. I know we do. We miss the energy. So what else has been happening this week that stood out for you guys, whether it's in the news or...
I can tell you, I am very excited about those student loans. I am so happy. People are fussing about my president. Leave him alone.
Yeah, I've heard all kinds of. I've heard, of course, what we call the haters. Those are like, hey, I paid mine, you should pay yours. And then those who are still benefiting are saying, we want more. So it's like, I feel like in these situations, it's just like,
I think it's good.
Just can't please them. Man.
Yeah.
Let's be real. If you are a believer and you're mad about what just transpired, then you ought not be a Christian, because you ought to be excited about the fact that the debt has been paid.
That's right. 10,000, man, that's a blessing.
Yeah, 20 for some. So that.
Yeah, 10 to 20.
Somebody stepped in and paid a debt that you
couldn't pay. We got preachers on the line.
Get excited for your neighbor.
You can tell when a brother got a student loan. Because Just Done is going on and made this a test of fellowship. It's the 24th. That we have the 23 major doctrines. This is the 24th now.
I'm with you, GP. I'm one of your members. I'm with you, buddy.
As far as I'm concerned, in the news, the thing that gets me is the continuing revelation of who Donald John Trump is as a human being. Nobody is surprised at the perfidious nature of his lack of character. But what gets me is how people continue to suspend their disbelief, where they say he didn't have anything in his possession, and they find all of these documents, and now they say the FBI must have planted them. I'm just amazed that people, are deceived by
his attorney was there. Yeah, his attorney was on the present, on the resident. So it's impossible.
So it's he just reminds me so much of that personality who deceiveth the whole world.
Well, you see that little statue they made of him, right? Golden statue.
Oh yeah, I remember that.
Blonde hair. You remember that?
I remember that.
Yeah.
Wow.
So something I saw on the news that was pretty disturbing. I was praying for some of those folks. The flooding in Mississippi. I mean,
wow.
Imagine rain and then flooding.
They just had it in Texas. Oh my goodness.
Saying that the waters will crest up to 35 feet by Monday or Tuesday.
That's
so they're telling everyone to get out of Jackson. So
my goodness.
Serious situation.
Wow.
That's incredible. Yeah.
I'm sure ACS is gearing up to help that situation, because I know they were in Texas, so I'm sure they're in Mississippi. Wow, that's a lot going on. All right, Marlena. Somebody said Tiffany says she likes your hair. Your hair looks pretty. We got to give you a little shout out there.
Thank you, Tiff, in the public. Thank you, Tiff.
50%. Do you like my shirt?
Text me.
Do you like my shirt? Can I
Look
get
at that Hampton shirt.
Yeah, it seems a little sexist. It seems sexist to me, doesn't it, GP?
They're like, we brushed our hair too, right? Okay.
I'll just have Tiffany. I want you to know I get compliments every time I go by the school for the blind. So.
All right. Well, guys, as you guys know, we have an awesome show tonight. We love when we have guests because we can ask them all the questions. And we promised that we are going to have a part 2 to this discussion. We're talking about our upcoming constituency session. We want to make sure that all of you out there have as much information as you possibly can, that you understand the process through and through. So this is another opportunity for you to ask your questions. So before we bring our guests on, go ahead and get ready. If you have any questions about the whole constituency process tonight, we're going to be focusing more so on the session, the actual day, what takes place, what's appropriate, what's inappropriate, and all those questions. So go ahead and share this. Make sure anybody you think needs to be a part of this, share it right now, because we're bringing on our special guest. First, we're bringing back our Vice President for Administration, Dr. Marcellus Robinson. Maybe I'll bring you up here. And we also have Attorney Jackson Doggette Jr. here with us. Welcome. We're all moving.
We're looking for some excitement.
Yeah, we're the audience. That's right. It comes from us. So welcome to the Upset Podcast. Dr. Robinson, you've been here before, but Elder Doggette,
welcome. I'm trying to figure out why I came back.
Yeah, you had fun last time. You had fun last time. And so,
I escaped.
Yes, so we have a lot of questions that we didn't get to last time, or things that have been emailed to us, and so we're going to jump into some of these questions because I'm sure they'll generate even more questions, and we want to leave enough time for as many questions to be asked as possible. And so I'll start off with the first one, and of course the team and others will join it after. And I think we may have touched on this, but on session day, who actually can even be there? I mean, is this an open forum? Anybody who's a part of AEC just walk in the building on October the 16th, or how does that work?
Well, normally the session, this one in particular, since we have limited space because of COVID, is for the delegates, whether you're regular delegates or delegates at large.
Okay.
You can attend.
Okay.
Let me ask you this, Elder. If, let's say, we were in a very large venue, and which would be more than enough room for the delegates, would and there's no COVID, okay, all those factors, would there be created like a gallery, like for instance in the Capitol, in the Senate and the Congress, there are people who can sit in the gallery to witness legislation go. Would we have Could we have something like that if we didn't have these limitations like space and the COVID pandemic?
Yes, yes. We had that at the last one. There was a room reserved where people could come and witness the session, but they were in a different room because when it came time for voting, which we did manually then, you don't want people who are not delegates being counted when it's time to vote. Only those who are authorized to vote should be allowed to vote.
Dr. Robinson, is it true that there will be a virtual or a live stream
Yes.
of the service of the session?
Wow.
Yes. Yes.
Very good.
So they can participate. The first time we had the live stream was at the last session. Am I right, Natasha?
That's right. We streamed it live. Now, we won't be taking questions from the live stream.
I think this is the third one.
Third one. Oh, it's the
What's
third
the
one?
third one?
The first one was in Sandy Cove.
Wow.
We streamed that one.
Oh,
I didn't know
I
that.
didn't know
that.
it was streamed.
Yeah. And then of course at Reaching Hearts, and then this time it makes it 3.
So everybody's been duly warned. If you comment in the chat, you will be ignored.
Yeah, I just want people to know, since this is so interactive and we're inviting questions, just know during the stream of the session, we won't have the opportunity to bring those questions to the floor on your behalf or anything like that. So I just want to make sure that that's clear for our audience here. All right. So at this point, have most of the delegates been identified? I kind of want to keep everybody.
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
Most of the regular delegates have been identified. Over 134 churches have responded thus far out of 172. 134 have responded. 34 as of Friday had not sent in their delegates. And we contacted those churches. And tomorrow morning, emails should have the majority of those responses.
Okay. All right.
Are retired ministers delegates at large, or
If they're voted by their church?
but that's not at large.
No,
yeah.
they're not. No, they're not delegates at large.
So retired. What are retired ministers at this point? Are they
Viewers,
Retired
online viewers?
They're retired.
They're retired. According to our bylaws, they're retired.
Retired at large.
Lo, how the mighty have fallen.
We'll keep you posted, Tally. We'll send you some notes.
Oh wow.
Yeah, but that is a good question.
Yeah, it's a good question.
Somebody else said that. Retired. All right, let's keep these questions going. Okay, so our delegates, you talked about the fact that we have over 100 of them. Well, churches have
413 delegates.
430. Okay.
Regular delegates. Yeah.
When the delegates arrive
Mm-hmm.
to the location on October the 16th, what do they do when they get there?
They register.
Okay.
And we have a scanning mechanism where they just scan in and they're recorded. Their packets will be sent ahead of time, and then they can download them even off the webpage.
Okay.
All the materials for the session for the delegates, there'll be a special place where they can download their materials and have access to it ahead of time. So that it's required that we send it out, I believe, at least 2 weeks in advance of the session, so they can have that material. Attorney Doggette can correct me if I say something wrong. But they have it in plenty of time for their perusal review. Hopefully, ministers and area leaders can review those informations with them to make them informed delegates coming to the session. Because those reports are generated from the 3 executive officers as well as the departmental people. And then there will be audited financial statements for review. And also reports from Pine Forge Academy and their audited financial statements and the bylaws. Yeah, those bylaws from Allegheny East Conference and Pine Forge Academy.
Those bylaws. We wanna talk
Those
about
bylaws generate a lot of questions. Yeah.
yes, those bylaws. Let's jump to that. General Counsel, what are these bylaws? What does that mean in the context of all of this?
Bylaws are the law that controls your organization. The organization must function inside of the rules that are listed in the bylaws. So every 5 years, the Standing Bylaws Committee, which reports to the constituents, sits and is called at the pleasure of the chairman, who is the vice president for administration. People can send to his office suggestions for changes in the bylaws, which has been happening. The bylaws committee, the Standing Bylaws Committee that is selected by the constituents, deliberates over those. It then gives a report to the executive committee, who gives some feedback. And the bylaws committee, through the chairman, gets feedback from pretty much all of the stakeholders. I understand that there will be some feedback gotten from all of the areas before the session. And Dr. Robinson can tell you about that. But the Standing Bylaws Committee does not change the bylaws. They make recommendations to the constituents. At constituency meeting, the changes are voted. So it's a process that goes on for 5 years, and then it's brought to the session and the constituents vote. During the session, the Standing Bylaws Committee will be in session. So even there, people can bring recommendations and those can come to the floor.
Mm-hmm. And we normally meet every Tuesday around 7 o'clock for at least an hour. Before we meet, normally my vice chair, Dr. William Niles, the guru of bylaws for Allegheny East Conference, and Jackson Doggette and myself, we meet pre-meeting for the bylaws committee to review the agenda for that evening. And as Elder Doggette says, we try to make most people aware that they can send their recommendations in any day. They can shoot an email, and we'll take that recommendation to the bylaws committee for review. It is taken to the bylaws committee, and the bylaws committee is composed of representatives from every area of the conference. You have local representatives from your area that you placed on the bylaws committee. We had one person last week to send in their resignation because they're not able to attend as they would like to. And so this week we will fill that slot with an alternate that was voted by that area to make sure they are fully represented on the bylaws committee.
I have a question for our communications director. Are those committees on our website so that people know who's representing them in their areas?
You know, now that you mention it, I don't think we have the names of the bylaws committee. We do have the name of executive committee members, but not the bylaws. So I think we need to add that. That's an important point. And then where they're from, so people can identify.
Yeah, my office can get that information to you.
Okay, perfect. Great example. Now, I didn't know that people could at any point suggest to the bylaws committee. You know, I thought there was just like this window of time when if you have suggestions, you know, and usually it's the height of the constituency session coming up that people start generating changes that they have. But you're saying during the whole 5-year period.
The whole 5-year period.
Wow. Okay.
The whole 5-year period. They can make their recommendations or suggested changes. And for example, we had a person send in a recommendation that we changed the process of electing officers and the whole slate, how we do it. The committee didn't see light in it this time, but because he thought it was too much changes at one time. It's hard for people to digest change. You got to digest a little at a time. And so, but the thing is, it was brought to the committee. Another recommendation was that was brought to the committee was dealing with the superintendent of education. That was a hot item. In fact, former superintendent of education and principal sent in a recommendation and pleaded with us to change how we elect a superintendent of education and not to do it at the session time. And it found a lot of support in the committee, because the primary reason they asked for the change is that when you change the superintendent of education, let's say in October, school has started.
True.
And you disrupt the whole educational system. It's
Wow,
disrupted.
yeah, that's true.
And it's at the beginning, they said, please don't do that. Change it and make it so that it's not during the school year. Okay.
That makes sense.
And so the committee saw light in it. And Elder Doggette, would you share with the group our suggestion? Because we're trying to get the information out.
Right. The suggestion is that the executive committee will select the superintendent after the session by May 31st for them to be able to begin July 1st. And if there is a change, there will be some overlap so that there can be some transition. But the new superintendent would serve a 5-year term beginning July 1 after the session.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. I think
Has that been approved, gentlemen?
No, that has to
No.
be voted at the
Has to be voted.
constituency meeting.
I mean, a quick question, and that is in between constituency meetings, when you have exigencies that come up like this and there needs to be a change, are these things approved by the executive committee pending the final approval of the constituent body?
No. The executive committee serves between sessions unless there's a special session called.
Right.
And there are ways to call a special session, but that's usually not done. The executive committee will take care of those exigencies and report them.
Right. So basically, I guess what I was asking is, if something came along like this and someone said, we see light in this, between sessions, would the executive committee have the power to approve that alteration in the bylaws?
No.
You could not function until you got to the next constituency meeting?
Well,
You can't change the bylaws until you get to the next constituency meeting. The executive committee can make some decisions as it relates to personnel in between sessions, but the bylaws themselves, according to our bylaws, cannot be amended except at the constituency session.
Got you. Okay.
So my question is, will the session, the session in October, be governed by the current bylaws or the revised bylaws?
Excellent question. The current bylaws are what the session must follow until the session votes the new ones.
Oh, okay.
And that can happen during the session.
It must happen during the session. But I'll give you an example. Right now, under our current bylaws, everybody must, the nominating committee must bring names to the session. That would include the superintendent. For the superintendent issue to change, the constituents must vote that change, and it could be implemented at the session, even if the nominating committee had a name to present. Because if the bylaws are amended there, you follow what the amended bylaws are.
Okay.
But until they are amended, they're only ideas.
And you said that at the session, someone could make a recommendation that the bylaws committee would consider even that day that could possibly be voted?
yes.
Okay.
Yes, in fact, the bylaws committee sits in session
Right.
during the session to hear recommendations or consider recommendations. And they could bring them to the floor to be voted by the body. And if the body votes them, then they can become implemented.
That's good to know, because people are always asking, well, how do we make changes or how do we make our recommendations? And now we're hearing this is an opportunity at the session if you're a delegate or delegate at large.
Yeah, I should say, as we move forward, what we are hoping coming into the next quinquennium is the fact that the members get to know who their representatives are, um, and have dialogue with your representatives, so that you can know what your rights and privileges are and exercise them freely. Tally asked a question about if you wanted to make a change in between sessions. You can call a special constituency meeting. The executive committee of the conference has the right to call a special committee at a time and a place it deems proper. Has to be voted, though, by the executive committee, or it is voted by the delegates at the constituency session, or it is requested by 51% of the churches of the conference as voted by their boards. So, and then the agenda for that meeting should include the notice of the meeting, and only such items as included in the agenda shall be discussed at that special constituency session. So those are options that we have. And I guarantee you, most people don't even realize that if you wanted to really make a change, or you didn't like what was the direction of the conference or what's happening, and you're irritated a lot, you can just get 51% of the church boards in the conference to vote to have a special constituency session. And we have to accommodate that request.
Wow. Okay.
Okay.
Didn't know
Some of, us,
that.
some of us are learning this for the first time. They're
Yeah.
getting, they're getting their list ready.
Let's
One.
be honest. It's rare you're going to get half the churches in the conference to
Yeah.
decide things are
Oh,
so bad. We've
half
got
of
to
the
burn
churches,
this
I got
down
you.
and build it back up.
Yeah. Yeah, but the thing is, sometimes people feel, especially the country we living in right now, with if you get the wrong person in place, man, and start acting crazy, there's nothing you can do. Well, yeah, there is something you can do. If they're acting that crazy, you can get together and say, no, we need to do something about this. And you can. But hopefully that will never happen, because hopefully you put in responsible leaders who want to work and realize we're servants of the people. Okay. Our office supports the work of ministry, and the work of ministry is done in the local churches and schools in our communities. The money comes through the local churches.
Through.
Okay. So we know who funds ministry in Allegheny East Conference.
Power to the people.
Yeah. Power to the people. And the thing I've been reflecting more with the questions asked, it's hitting me more and more that the people do have the power, but the problem is people don't realize they have the power.
Right. They don't exercise it. Yeah.
Yeah. They don't realize it. And for example, I'm a member of a local church, right? If I do something
untoward,
that shouldn't be done, and they vote me out of membership, I cease to be able to serve in this capacity.
Elder Robinson, you indicated earlier that any constituent, delegate or no, could send a recommendation to the bylaws committee.
Yes.
Who would that person send that recommendation to?
They could, okay, your number one, you have representatives you could send it to and have them deliver it, okay? But if you want to send it directly, you can send it directly to my email address at mrobinson@aecsda.com.
Okay, and you indicated representatives. Would that be a lay representative on the executive committee?
It could be. But normally when I'm talking about your representatives, when it comes to bylaws, would be the person who represents your area on the bylaws committee.
On the bylaws committee.
But the person on your representative on the executive committee, again, see, here you go. You have a representative on the executive committee.
Right.
You can give that information to them. Every time we meet, they can say, Pastor Robinson, I have this recommendation for your committee. And they pass it along, and I'll make sure my committee gets it. But the thing
I find
is,
it, I'm sorry, no, you finished. I didn't want to cut you off.
No, I was just saying that, but most people don't realize they have these different options. So another recommendation from the bylaws committee that's being proposed is we change how we do town hall meetings in Allegheny East Conference and make it more viable. At the last podcast, somebody said, how can we become more connected with the conference? And because we seem disconnected. And so the bylaws committee looked at the town hall meetings and the fact that we had a lay advisory committee that really hasn't functioned in the last 10 years. And they said, now, how can we make sure we have the input of our lay people, as well the engagement of our lay people, not just conversation, but engagement in forging the mission for a local area. And I think we've come up with a nice way to engage members from our executive committee, the area leader, and our membership in forging an agenda for their area. And I'm asking Attorney Doggette if he would share that with you at this time.
Well, the bylaws committee said that they want to have at least or require at least 2 town hall meetings, but it's encouraged that every area have a town hall meeting every year. The way that they want to make sure that it is area led, the area leader, the non-employee executive committee members, and the pastors would get together with one representative from each church and work out what the agenda will be. So the agenda is generated from the area. The 3 officers and all of the department directors will be invited to participate in that meeting so that the area can give suggestions and ask questions of everybody from the conference that's serving the churches. So those will be done. The area leader will call the meeting, and each of the boards, the suggestion is that each of the boards of members with less than 200 members would select 3 board members from their church, and churches with 200 members or more will select 5 members, board members from their church that will actually do the deliberations at the town hall meetings. Any member will be able to come and witness, be in the gallery, but only those who have been selected by their church, the board members from their church, those are the ones who will be in the deliberations with the officers and the directors. After the meeting, the area leader will make sure, I forget the time frame, but it's 2 weeks, is it?
Yes.
Elder? 2 weeks, they will send the minutes from the meeting to the conference, vice president for administration, and then within 30 days of the meeting, those minutes will be distributed to every church in that area. So everyone will know what was discussed, what was decided, what is expected. They will have a record of it. And then, frankly, each year it ought to be viewed as metrics. Have you done what we said we needed? And if you haven't, you are building a record to determine whether we're being effective in serving or not. So I think that is a much better way because it is area-led. The agenda is from the area, and the responsibility to respond is on the conference employees.
Let me ask a question. I'm sorry. I just had a quick question I wanted to ask in reference to. Is there a document, a published document that constituents can view to understand the prescribed workflow process? You know, you mentioned how many churches could have delegates and what that process is. Is there a document that any of our members can view to fully understand what that process is? Because I'm sure there are some listening that they may be trying to take notes and try to figure this out, but is there a document that they can view?
It's called the bylaws. So
okay. All of that information is in the bylaws.
All of this information will be in the delegates package. It will be premiered to all the constituents. Elder Robinson's office is committed to doing that before the session. But ultimately, what is voted is what is going to be available to everyone to view. Right now, like I said, they are suggestions. They are not the bylaws. They are the bylaws suggestions. And people have an opportunity at the session to vote those.
Right. Yeah, I guess I was looking specifically at the breakdown. You know, if you have so many, if your church is a certain size, you're entitled to. Yeah, just those things that they can review and understand. You know,
would it be helpful if we created a separate document related to the bylaws that might be more succinct,
like an abstract?
Yeah, like an abstract, having information. Yes. Is that what you're referring to?
Yeah, like a companion document that helps people understand. This is how the delegates are structured. This is how the process has been established, and that's how. Because some people, they just don't know. They say, well, how do we get from here to there? So if there was a companion document along with the bylaws to kind of help, explain that a little more in detail.
I think that would be great. I'll accept that challenge and working on that. Okay.
Yeah, there may be some delegates who are going this fall, who may be there for the first time, who might not know Robert's Rules of Order, and they might be wondering, what is a motion? What is a point of order? How can you help those session rookies navigate these boring discussions? Help them out, please.
Sure. I'm out of here. Bye.
I predicted that.
Listen, the church does not now use the Robert's Rules of Order for constituency meetings. Back in 1985, at the New Orleans General Conference, the delegates requested that there be some other rules that are more succinct and help to facilitate the participation of the delegates and doing the business of the meeting without getting stuck in all of these technicalities and rules. So they came up with what they call the General Conference Rules of Order, which you can Google and get online. General Conference Rules of Order. They're available online. The whole point is to make the meeting accessible to the people. The business can get done in a smooth manner, but there will be some framework so that it will be done decently and in order. And I can anticipate one question which always comes up. And I always, each year, I do a little pre-session instruction so people understand how to deal with this one thing that comes up every time. And that is, what if we don't like what the nominating committee does? What if we want a particular name to go back to the committee? What do? In the Rules of Order, under the section Elections, number 6 says, if there is an objection to a part or the whole of the nominating committee report, the objection or objector or objectors may request that the report, not the individual name, but that the report be referred back to the nominating committee for further consideration. So if someone has a real burden and they have some information, here's the thing. If it's just a preference, it's inappropriate to send the report back. I'm going to say that again. If the person you wanted in a particular position was not selected by the nominating committee and you have nothing except your preference, it is inappropriate to send that report back to the nominating committee, because the first thing that will happen, well, let me finish how it's done. The chairman usually will just accept that. Mr. Chairman, I'd like to send the report back to the nominating committee. Typically, the chairman will accept it and tell the person, I'll meet you down stage left so you can tell me why you want to send it back. You have to have some information, a reason that you are sending it back. Mr. Chairman, the person that is being selected, we just saw them on the news. They were arrested for bank robbery. You follow what I'm saying? You've got something that really needs to be known that people didn't know. But that gets processed with the chairman and the secretary of the nominating committee. If it's something that should go back, the chairman and the secretary will talk with the nominating committee about how that's going to be processed. Sometimes people will be able to come into the room and state their case. Sometimes the chairman in his discretion will say, we've gotten some information that is, well, if it's public, like an arrest for a robbery or something, well, we just found out that this person is not eligible because they are in jail right now. That has not been adjudicated, but we need to probably select someone else. You follow what I'm saying? Mm-hmm. There has to be a reason. And if the chairman does not want to send it back, it is in order for someone to move that it be sent back. If there is a second, a simple majority can send it back.
Well, just to be clear, so you can simply stand and say, Mr. Chairman, I would like to refer the report back to the committee without making it a motion?
You could.
Okay.
But
then it's up to the
normally
discretion of
what
the chairman.
The chairman will say is, would you make that a motion?
Okay.
Because he has two options. Remember, he can say, all right, let's just take it back. But normally they're going to want to know why. So do we have any support for this?
But if nobody knows what you know, unless you whisper it in the chair's ear, it's kind of difficult to get any kind of sustaining support for your motion.
That's why you don't have to have a motion. The chairman can, at his discretion or her discretion, decide, yes, okay, let's take it back. Okay. And they'll ask you, because before the nominating committee and everybody gets up and marches to the room, he or she is going to find out what's your information.
Gotcha.
And if they say, I just don't like that person, he's going to say, we're not going back on that. This is the report. And then he'll get up and say in a very diplomatic way, we have heard the information, and it's not something that would require the nominating committee to process.
But
what happens in the case? I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Go ahead, Chuck.
I was going to say, what happens in the case if a person comes and says, I object to a particular name and will need to speak with, for some reason, if the chairman allows for that person to express why?
You can't send it back on an individual name. And the chairman will make that clear. Because he or she does not want anyone to be called out, so to speak, from the nominating committee report. That's one of the reasons why they're not saying, okay, who is it that you want to send back? They don't ask that question. They send the entire report back. And then he or she finds out what is the information that you have that requires us to process.
So and that should be done privately? Or if someone, because I've seen quite a few constituency sessions and they've turned into quite spectacular, exchanges. Is this something that a person would do at the open mic, or should they ask or maybe write a note or whatever, not to make it a spectacle, but get it to the nominating committee?
Open mic. Yeah, Mr. Chairman, I move that we refer the report back to the nominating committee. Second. And most of the time when that is done, someone will second it because they don't know what's going on, but they second it just so it can get going. And then the chair will say, if there's a simple majority, we'll send it back. And usually the simple majority shows up because people want to know what's going on. Mm-hmm. The constituents will almost never know. The nominating committee will know once the chairman knows if it's an appropriate thing to take back.
So what about in the case where there are multiple people who line up at the mic? The first person at the mic says that, but the other people wanted to say the same and may have something to share. How do they, do they say, okay, how
You
does that
don't
work?
share it at the open mic. You
Right,
simply ask the report to go back.
Okay.
And then the chairman will let the people know how to give us the information so we can process it.
Okay.
And I want to point out, you're talking to the parliamentarian
Mhm.
who's being recommended to the constituents to be the parliamentarian for this session. So you're talking to the right person.
Mhm. He'll be the one that calls the point of order, or people.
I don't call a point of
No.
order.
You don't call point of order. People call a point of
He
order,
calls
and then
balls and
you.
strikes. He's the umpire.
I actually the parliamentarian will only get involved when the chairman needs some assistance.
Okay.
Right,
The chairman is running the meeting.
right.
And if there is, for instance, if the chairman makes a call and the people don't like it and they vote, because they can, I move that this be reconsidered, and it's voted, then I can talk to the chairman and say, okay, here are your options. Or if the chairman turns and says, what are my options here? That's what I'm there for. So I'm not going to really, the parliamentarian doesn't really get involved until asked.
Right.
So I just want to be clear. So if there is a line of people, someone else says, I want to send it back. Those people who are in line who wanted the same thing to send it back, not saying anything specific, but just saying,
Right.
will they all be asked? Will they,
Yes.
the chairman will ask those? Okay. That's
Everybody who wants to send it back and has information that they feel is pertinent, that the nominating committee needs to process, all of them have the opportunity to talk to the chairperson, tell them what it is, and the chairperson, secretary, and the nominating committee will determine how to process it.
Okay. All right. Great.
I have a question, gentlemen, Dr. Robinson or Dr. Doggett. With the nominees of the various positions, is there a write-up or something to identify the constituents of who the various people are? Because you have people from various places that are not aware of certain names so that they can vote intelligibly. Is there anything that happens like that?
I'm going to let Dr. Robinson take the first swipe at that. That's not really a legal question. It's a process question.
All right.
I want to understand.
I have an answer, but
The question is, so if someone was being voted for the superintendent, education, a lot of people don't know who they are. Is there a little write-up or something that you put on a screen or handout or something to describe who the nominees are so that when people vote, they can vote intelligibly, or there's like, I don't know, okay. You know what I'm
Okay.
saying?
I'm gonna let Natasha answer this question because at each session,
Y'all want me to answer it?
She's been doing an excellent job. She's been doing an excellent job on sharing with the constituents the nominating committee's recommendation.
Yeah. Yes, at the last session, because we had heard that same comment, what we tried to do was to take at least 3 or 4 highlights from the person's resume or things that were submitted to the nominating committee, same information, and just pull out 2 or 3 things. Well, I think it was maybe 3 or 4 things that will give people an idea of why they were nominated. So along with their picture were those 3 or 4 bullet points. I mean, some people still felt like that wasn't enough, but that's the best that we could do in terms of the information that we could make available in that time frame. But I do have there's a question from the chat.
And the reason I don't want anybody to think I'm trying to avoid answering that question. That's outside of my portfolio as vice president for the conference. Normally at that stage, you're dealing with the union president, who's the chair of the nominating committee. So he makes the determination how they will dispense information to the delegates at large. Am I right, Ella Doggett?
that's correct.
Okay.
But Pastor Doggett, you did say you had an answer that you were going to share?
It's a process situation, and it was ultimately what Dr. Robinson just said. The chairman is going to guide the session as to what these different processes are. And I see a question in the chat, I think that Latasha is about to ask it, and I'm chomping at the bit to answer. What if the person remains on the report after you send the report back? if the person remains on the report, that means that once the nominating committee has processed the information, they have decided as a committee that they still want to make that recommendation to the body. The body has the opportunity to vote it up or vote it down, but the nominating committee makes the ultimate decision about who they recommend to the session.
Okay.
And that kind of goes along with how are they vetted, because the nominating committee is the committee that vets those who are
That's
nominated.
correct.
Let me ask a question about that. I'm young and ambitious. Suppose I want to be president. How do I run for president? Does anybody run for president?
Well,
Again, that's process, but I do have an answer.
That'd be a no.
hey, they will be still running.
I mean, can I come to the nominating committee and say, put me, I want to be considered for president? And there
No.
was silence for the.
I'm going to actually answer, but I want to give it to the Vice President for Administration first, because
How do people run for office?
Well, in our system, you don't run.
Yeah, you do.
You might
They
be
just
running.
don't call it running. Yeah.
Yeah, they don't call it running.
Okay.
To consider the president, first of all, you have to be an ordained minister.
Okay.
So
check one box.
So, okay, you can check that. But a layperson couldn't check it.
Okay.
Okay. So that would rule out over half the delegates right there.
Okay.
And what's being proposed in the present bylaws, it says you have to be a ordained minister, and you have to
of experience.
Of experience. Yep. Of experience.
Can that be good or bad?
Well, see, the bylaws committee raised that question. And see, we look at the bylaws, and the question was, and that's why I love this bylaws committee, because they don't just rubber stamp things. They look at it grammatically. It doesn't make sense to the average person. Mm-hmm. And so that question was raised on that point alone, of experience. And they said, what do you mean of experience? What is that? And they thought that we should put some context to that. And the union secretary who meets with us, providing governance oversight, making sure we're doing everything in order. She spoke to that. That normally it's an ordained minister who has gone through several experiences and stuff. And they said, well, how many years? Could we put some years on it? Because the average person doesn't know what it means. And the committee came up with a suggestion. Elder Doggette, you want to share with this audience on what that suggestion is?
The suggestion is that they be an ordained minister with 10 years of lead pastor experience after ordination.
Really? But that still doesn't address my question. That addresses the question of qualifications.
Exactly.
Let's stipulate that a person is qualified. Mm-hmm. How does that person say, I have friends who are in the AME church, and they run for office. Somebody's calling Marlena right now to see if she's running.
Why you had to say it was me?
You look down at your phone. But I mean, so how does a person
terrible?
How does a person get themselves into a place where their name can be considered and they can launch themselves towards that consideration for being president, vice president, whatever, communications director? Coming after you, Tasha.
You can have it.
If I may give my answer now. First of all, it's a misnomer. Let me start a different way.
Okay.
Our desire as a church is to follow the leading of the Holy Spirit. Let's start with that. The desire is to get a word from the Lord and follow it. Now, sinful man as we are, whenever there is more than one person in relationship, there are politics. Mm-hmm. And we pretend that there are no politics in the church. The church is extremely political. Mm-hmm. And individuals are extremely political. Mm-hmm. And individuals actually do run for president. Mm-hmm. But it is not recommended that people get their groups together to get votes lined up and all of it. Happens, and we know it happens, but it shouldn't be happening.
Shouldn't, no.
And because the church has made the decision, we are not going to put each job up for application.
So in the absence of clear process, where a person might be adequately considered for a job that they may perceive that a word from the Lord has come to them, in the absence of a process, how do you just wait for the moving of the Lord in the nominating committee room?
I'll give you my answer. It is my opinion that, let's take president, just because that's the one everybody cares about. Let's take president.
They care about the treasurer too.
Treasurer.
Yeah, I mean, the
vice
person counting the money gets a lot of consideration.
Ministerial.
Yeah, I mean.
Okay. A person's work ought to speak for them. A person's work, not their personality, not their popularity, not their incumbency. Their work ought to speak for them. Does that always happen? Of course not. Other things come in. But it is my opinion, and that's all it is, my opinion, that a person's work should speak for them. So if a person wants to be, name anything, communications, what is their work? What are they doing to demonstrate the gift? What are they doing that shows that they have not only a passion for it, but an ability for it, et cetera, whether or not they are selected for that position or job in the conference? The Bible says a person's gifts make room for you. And sometimes I question how, but it does if you will do the work. So it's my opinion that if God is calling you to a particular kind of work, do the work, whether you are elected to it or not. Now, some things you can't do. You can't be president.
I can't be there. Yeah, if I wanted to do the work of the president,
there's some things you can't do.
I can't just go show up and say,
yeah.
You know.
But you hone, in my opinion, you hone the skill and be prepared like Daniel or be prepared like David. It might take you some years running in the wilderness, but eventually, if that's really where God wants you, I honestly believe that's where. I
want to be clear, though, because it appears that there is no process whereby an individual can make themselves available vocally and outwardly for consideration for an office. Am I hearing you
That's
gentlemen
correct? And it is my opinion further that as a denomination, and whether the denomination ever does this or not, I think Allegheny East should at some point begin to fashion a succession planning process where there are experiences available to anybody who thinks they have the gift. They might not get the job, but for instance, I'll give you a for instance, public affairs, religious liberty. That's what I do right now as well as general counsel. So let's say a person wants to be the public affairs, religious liberty director. What are the articulated objective criteria for becoming a public affairs, religious liberty director at Allegheny East Conference? What are the experiences that I can seek or have the opportunity to do in order to find out, A, do I have the ability, and B, is the Spirit of God on me for this? I think we as Allegheny East at some point should start fashioning a system where we are intentionally finding people with gifts and passions that we need to advance the work. And a person can raise their hand and say, I'd like to be in that
I'd
process.
like to do that. Okay.
Yeah, I feel very strongly that we should do that, because I think a lot of times Allegheny East Conference, in my opinion, I don't know that anybody can defy this, has the most educated ministry in North America.
Mm-hmm.
We have more doctoral recipients in this conference than any other conference. That means we got a lot of talent and a lot of information, knowledge, skills, and limited opportunity to actually express that in a way that it will help the whole conference. So it seems to me we should come up with a way to harness that talent, and people can raise their hand and say, I have an interest in this, and there be a process. Doesn't mean you're going to get elected, but there is a process that prepares you for that kind of responsibility. And the process will show you you don't have it, and the process can show you you do.
Move it, Mr. Chairman.
So that brings up this question here, because we don't operate like that currently. So then how does the nominating committee acquire their pool currently in our current construct?
That's a good question. That's subject to the chairman of the nominating committee. And I believe the union president would, you might want to invite him on this program to answer that question, because he's the one who spearheads that nominating committee. And he gives them direction and guidance in how they proceed in reviewing candidates and vote before they vote on candidates, that information, whoever they are. So like Jackson said, the best thing, and answering your question, Tally, the best thing to be considered for any position is to be faithful where you've been planted right now. That's the best way to be observed by people, or people say, I think I see this gift in you, I see the skill set in you. Do your work where you are. Let me share this with this group. The first time I was elected to an executive committee was at a session, and I didn't even know what an executive committee was. And a person came up to me and said, congratulations, you're a member of the executive committee. I said, what is that? And and the person looked at me, you don't know what an executive committee is? I said, I never heard of one. And not knowing that executive committee meant to hire me. And I told him, no, I don't know. He said, well, you'll get the information and you'll find out. And that's what happened. But my thing was, it was a wonderful experience being on that executive committee, because you, being new to it, you learn a lot about the conference and its operations and things of that nature. But I wasn't looking to be on nobody's executive committee. I was just serving the church where I was planted. And they tell me the president recommended me for that executive committee. And at that time, I was 30-some years of age. I didn't know what that was. And so notice who recommended me was the president of the conference at the time. And so he didn't speak to me before he made the recommendation or anything. So I showed up and learned. And so, but what if somebody, like you say, Tyler, believes they've been called to that? I would tell you, share that, do the work, and then let people affirm you. And then, and people, normally leaders in the conference will say, have you considered this? And if you, then answer honestly, don't act like, no, I haven't considered, but if they ask you and say, if you're willing to, we will mentor you. You see what I'm saying? At least we can get to that phase in the church work. where we recognize God's gift set in a person and encourage them to pursue it. We should be doing that already.
I have a
All right.
question.
Okay.
I have a quick question. The nominating committee members' names are published, correct? Does the conference list the nominating committee names? Do you know who is on the nominating committee?
We know once they organize the committee, finish their meetings, there's a list compiled by the union. And we would know 2 weeks in advance who's on the nominating committee.
Okay, so you do learn who is on the nominating committee before the session.
Yes.
Okay. Would it be unusual or has it happened that delegates and members can lobby those nominating committee members?
It happens, honestly.
It happens, but
it happens all the time.
He said, should they?
No, can they? In other words, if there is a member or a delegate or a group of delegates who say, we agree that, XYZ would be a good candidate for a department director or an officer, could they approach a nominating committee member and lobby that person or broach that to a nominating committee member so as to encourage them to present a particular name?
I feel like one of those things in the back of the car where the head nods a lot. I mean, the people who are on the nominating committee are there to represent people from the area. I mean, that's
Mm-hmm.
I think not only should it have whether it does happen, I think it should. That people should say, hey, listen, I'd like for you to represent these thoughts, and the person on the nominating committee has the right to determine whether they will or not. But but I think they
can share that information with them, like you're saying, Tyler. Yeah. But once they get in that committee, they should, because information they will gain on that committee that you might not get before that committee, that might influence your decision on who you vote for. And it should happen based upon your experience in that room, who you vote for, as led and governed by the guidance of the Holy Spirit in your heart. So, yeah.
Okay, we did have another question from the chat, and then we'll get back to the session before we have to close. Is it true that the nominated president goes into the nominating committee to give suggestions for the rest of the officers and departmental directors?
That has been a standard practice, yes.
Tasha, you forgot to do like this when you said suggested.
Well, I think Dr. Robinson would want you to know that one of the suggestions that the bylaws committee is making is that at the session, the only people who will be elected, and this is not what's in the bylaws now, but it is suggested that it be the officers, the ex officio members of the executive committee, which would be the ministerial director and the area leaders, and the non-employee members of the executive committee would all be elected at the session, and the directors and the superintendent would be elected by the executive committee after session. The people who are in department leadership would stay in department leadership until they are reaffirmed or replaced by the executive committee, which should happen at the first meeting after the session.
Mm-hmm.
That gives an opportunity, and I'll lobby for that idea because that gives the opportunity for two things to happen. The first thing is the administration with the executive committee can really talk about the direction of the conference and what is needed to get the conference to that spot. So it may reorganize actually what positions are necessary as department leaders, as opposed to just simply putting a slate in of what has always been, perhaps there needs to be some thinking of what we need to move the conference forward. That's one. Two, it would give the opportunity really to take a look at who's got these gifts of what we need and what is the background that makes them the right person for the job at this time. It doesn't always mean they have the experience of the job. It might mean they have the background, the education, or they can get it. And their personality or their evident gift set would fit in a particular position. And it gives the nominating committee with, the executive committee with the recommendations of the officers to find those people to get the conference in that direction. So I personally like the idea, but that's something the constituents are going to have to decide.
And one reason the bylaws committee is making this suggestion is that the question was raised, the person who's nominated for president meets with the nominating committee to make recommendations. And the thing gets a little fuzzy because what if that person is not voted president who was nominated? Then all that work you did as a nominating committee is in vain, because then the president who's voted at that session will meet with the nominating committee to make recommendations on who would be the departmental directors. And as far as that concerned, probably the other officers also. But the thing is, doing it this way, it's a more clean way to do it. You would have your officers in place. They would have time to get together, and the president who is elected can share vision with the other officers for the conference. Then they can meet with the executive committee with an idea what direction they're going. The officers then could work with the executive committee on setting up a process whereby people can send in their resume to be considered for the different positions, as well as the incumbents, and then set up an interview process, and then however they want to process it to get the right person in place. I do know in past times, departmental directors have been selected by the executive committee. I know one that's on this podcast that was elected by the executive committee of the conference. And to tell you the truth, we didn't have a clue she should be considered for the position.
Who could that be?
The recommendation came from our HR department, who brought the file to my desk as vice president. I shared that file with the fellow officers, and we said, man, this fits the bill of what the constituents said at the session of the type of person they wanted in this position. And she's still here. And I wonder who that could be.
Well, GP has her in his arms, little Elizabeth Grace.
I have a question concerning terminology, just for a clear understanding. There are some people who feel that if an executive committee handles the departmental directors, that is not an election, that's an appointment. Mm-hmm. Clarify for me that if the constituents, if the power to elect a director is taken out of the constituents' hands as an electoral process, and it's given to the executive committee, is that still considered an electoral process, or is that an appointment by the executive committee?
I would argue it's an election still, because it has to be voted. It's not an appointment, because if it's an appointment, someone can come in and say, this is who it is.
But the election is by the executive committee only, and not
Correct.
By the constituents.
Correct. Who represent the constituents. But there's a pro and con to both processes. There are pros and cons to both processes. So the executive, the session is going to have to decide which one they like better.
Yeah. And the thing is, for it to happen, the people's will be done. The people decide which process they prefer. And we'd have to abide by the will of the people. All we can do as a bylaws committee is make a recommendation. That's it.
Okay.
Yeah.
A couple of questions that came in. One, when we were talking about, the process in terms of people maybe indicating that they're interested, is it appropriate for those currently in position to share their vision for the next 5 years while serving? Like say as a communication director, I just decided to share for the next 5 years, I see us going worldwide and having a TV station. I mean, is it appropriate for me right now at this stage to put out my vision and goals? And this goes for any office for the next 5 years. Is that appropriate for officers to do that in government office?
You talking about departmental directors?
Or anyone.
Or administrators?
Well,
I wish they would.
well,
But that's just me.
You can, but the way our system is set up, it could get a little sketchy because, for example, if I am a departmental worker, I work in conjunction with whoever's the president to help carry out their agenda for the conference. Okay. So how could I put that out there for the next 5 years and I don't know who the president is and what direction that person would be leading the conference? That's why that would be a stretch. I understand what you're saying in principle. For any of us, for example, with my office last time at this session, I recommended that the number one priority of this office would be to put together an employee handbook because we hadn't had one since 2003. And the good news is when I go to this session, I can say we accomplished that task. But now we're in the process of orientating each worker to that handbook and getting them acclimated to what's expected of them as employees of Allegheny East Conference 21st century style. So, but again, while in principle, I understand what you're saying, because anybody who's in a leadership position must be forward thinking. So that's why I hear, like Tally said, I wish you would, because you should be thinking that way. Otherwise, how can you be successful in developing and being the person you called to be, leading the position you're doing? So you should have some vision of where you are and where you're trying to go, no matter who's the leader of the conference.
I would contribute to that without a direction from the president, it is next to impossible to be effective as a director. And I say that because, like in a church, if the pastor does not support the ministry, it is difficult for that ministry to be effective. If the president is not supporting the directors, it is difficult for the directors to be effective.
If I might gently push back, just gently, gentlemen, these different ministries are elected by the constituents, which mean that their primary duty is to, and correct me if I'm wrong, that their primary duty is to serve at the behest of the constituents who elect them. Am I correct in that?
No, not the directors.
Yes, I am correct in that. I'm not asking how it works for real, but I mean,
here's why I say no, Tally.
Okay.
The directors serve under their supervisor, the president, and their job is to make the president's agenda work, not their agenda.
Is that stated somewhere? I mean,
it's not in writing, but that's how it's supposed to be. The president is supposed to have an agenda, and the directors are supposed to make sure that agenda gets done. Now, if that's not happening, what ends up happening is every man does what's right in his own eyes and tries to get something done, because in 5 years, you're going to have to give a report. That's what happens.
Well, I have a question to insert in here. Would it be reasonable for a member of the nominating committee to request some type of measurement, documented measurement of the performance of the current directors, so as to determine how successful they are or were, or how successful they plan to be with forecasting? In other words, if I were on the nominating committee and I would ask, you know, since we're picking on you, Latasha, we'll say, can you provide us with some kind of a performance report or review that suggests that Latasha is doing her job according to whatever parameters we establish, or not?
What you would get, every person on the nominating committee would get, is a job description for that department. Okay, they would get that. Okay,
right. But what about the performance level of the current person?
I'm just starting with what I know they do get.
Okay,
that's a job description, and in that job description, it does say tally. Their supervisor, direct supervisor, is the president of the conference. Okay,
that's in the job description.
That's in the job description for departmental workers. So that's clear. They work at the behest of the president. The president is the chairman of the executive committee. The chairman should receive reports from his departmental people that he shares with the executive committee, or invite them to the executive committee to share their reports of what activities and things are taking place in their department. And I believe in this last quinquennium, we had to, as departmental directors, we gave video reports and written reports where we had to report on activities we were doing annually that was shared with the executive committee. And Latasha is our representative on that executive committee, and she shared those information with the executive committee members. So Chuck, some of that information can be shared with the nominating committee. We have to submit reports for the constituency session, which is not detailed as to total performance, but a summary of highlighted performance and things we've done. And hopefully we've done our work in such a way that we touch the lives of local churches and schools in this conference. If not, then there might be a problem with our names coming back, from the nominating committee, because as Tally said, you affect the people, and the people has a right to say, hey, this is not working for us.
Based on what you just said to me, Elder Robinson, if these departmental directors are a de facto cabinet to the president,
right,
then the president should be able to appoint them.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, really, I'm just saying, if that is the way it is, the president should be able to make that appointment. I mean,
with the advice and the consent of the executive committee.
With their advice, consent, and approval, of course. But I'm simply saying that then I understand why the president gets a chance to make that appointment.
Right, and then that's why the question was raised. If you're a nominated president, really, how do you have the right to sit with a nominating committee and you haven't been elected yet? Because the people haven't made their will known. So what's going on here? And so we said to take that factor out as a bylaws committee. We were recommending that the departmental people be elected by the executive committee in conjunction with the officers of the conference after the session.
Before we say farewell, because normally when Elizabeth Gray shows up, that's time. It means it's time for us to go. But is it any way that these elections, once made at the time of the constituency meeting, that there could be a delay period between the time a person actually assumes the office, so that a person doesn't come to the session with a job and leave without one? For example, if somebody is elected in, and then suddenly you don't have a job because somebody else has been elected, or just practically speaking, everything stops because you got a new slate of people coming in, and they may not even know where the washrooms are. Can it be like we do in the United States? We elect you in November, you take office in January.
Well, Jackson, you want to answer
the
that?
bylaws currently say that all of the people who were holding office would stay in office for 30 days in order to have that transition period. That is currently in the bylaws.
Okay.
And currently in practice in Allegheny East, since I'm one who experienced that, where I wasn't returned to office, I was given the 30 days, and then the administration was kind enough to say, look, take some time to yourself, and then give us time to determine which direction we're going. You see what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm.
So they are in Allegheny East, I can testify that they are very compassionate working with a person in that transition period.
Also, it's not that you don't have a job.
Right.
You don't have that job.
Right.
You still have a job. You need to be placed someplace. It's rare that there is absolutely no way to place you.
But that's only if you're an ordained minister,
you can
correct?
Get placed.
Even if you're not if you're not a minister?
Well, I'm talking about ministers primarily.
I mean, because for example, if Tasha, let's say I run for office and I become the next communications director, and I will put a chicken in every pot and 40 acres and a mule. But and if Tasha then is not returned, she is literally out of a job. Am I correct?
Yeah, for 30 days.
But
thank you.
You're right. For 30 days.
Yeah. Okay. But I'm telling you that even in that situation, and it's incumbent upon leaders, I'll say this, it's incumbent upon leaders to treat people like they would want to be treated.
That's right.
You don't just drop somebody because they didn't get that job and they're not ordained.
That's true.
You've got to find a transition period. If you don't have anywhere in the conference to place, is there another conference where you can help place them? Or if there's no other conference where you can give that opportunity, what kind of transition can we have so that we're not upending a person's life because the constituents made a decision?
Compassion.
You've got to treat people like you would want to be treated.
Compassion. Okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
Oh, wow.
There's one question from the last podcast I want to answer before we go
please.
on.
Yeah, we have a few.
A person asked the question with the executive officers, do you have to be an ordained minister? The only executive officer who must be an ordained minister is the president.
Okay. That's right. That was asked. I remember that. So we clarified that. Very quickly, though, going back to the session, and we'll try to get a couple more questions from the chat because I know we're out of time. I wanted, if we could just quickly go through the agenda of the session, like what happens? I mean, do you just come right in and start nominating people? I mean, nominating committee gives their report, because that's really what people think. That's the bulk of the session. Can you just give an outline of everything that takes place on session day?
Well, since you asked, I have that information before me. Normally the process begins with worship. And we have, the president chooses a person.
A lot of praying done at the beginning there.
Yes, a lot of praying done. In fact, colors are posted, and then we have the morning hymn, and then we have the invocation. And then the president introduces the speaker. We have music, we have the message, we have music again, we have prayer. Praise God. And then sometimes people forget everything that took place after that prayer. and they rub their hands together and say, now let's get started.
It's good, yeah.
And then the president comes and makes a motion that we officially begin the proceedings, and the motion's carried. Then our parliamentarian comes forth and give us a session orientation for the delegates. Then we get a formal welcome from the area leader or the pastor of the church normally. Then we get a call and the seating of the delegates, which is done by the vice president for administration. And after that is done, we have an introduction of new churches. We have a listing in the booklet of those who have become new churches since the last session, and we officially vote them into the Sisterhood of Churches of Allegheny East Conference. And that's an exciting time for those new delegates. And this is the first session they've come to representing their churches. And then as secretary, we have official declaring of the quorum. No business can be transacted without that being done. And if we don't have a quorum, then we have no business. We say, nice seeing you today. God bless you. But then we get the administrative reports, the president's first. Then we vote his report. And normally after the president's report is given, we get a partial report from the nominating committee. And normally they will bring out the name for the president, or it has happened where they bring out the three names of the three officers, and the chair will ask what is their pleasure, to take one at a time or take them as a group. I've seen that done. But whatever they decide, once that's done, they accept the motion, and then they try to vote on it, or somebody can come forth, as we talked about earlier, and say, Mr. Chair, I would like to refer this report back to the nominating committee. I'll make that a motion, and somebody second it, and they vote it up or down. If it fails, then they go on and vote for the person the nominating committee has recommended. If not, then it goes back for consideration, the whole report, not the name that's on the floor. And then after that nominating committee's report is done, then we normally have the secretary's report. And after the secretary's report, by then it's noon and we break for lunch for 1 hour. After that, we normally get the treasurer's report, then the standing articles and bylaws committee's report, and then another report from the nominating committee comes forth. And after that, normally we have a call for the Pine Forge session, and we get a report from the principal of Pine Forge. We get their financial report by Elder Martin, and then we get the Standing Bylaws Committee report for the proposed changes for Pine Forge Academy. And then we deal with other business, and then once those items are done and the nominating report is completed, we hear from our newly elected president, charge, and then we have a benediction, and then we proceed home. At least those of us who remain, because it's been my experience in Allegheny East Conference, once they know who the president is, and they get their lunch, they say, sayonara, we see you later. But once we start at that meeting with the quorum in place, we can finish the business of the session for that day with those who remain. So that's the agenda.
And all of this takes about 3 or 4 hours, right?
Yes, it takes, well, it starts at what, 9:30? Hopefully a good day, we'll be out by 2. Bad day, we might be there to 5. In Allegheny East, I'm gonna tell you something. When I came here, and these folk, man, reports came and nobody was arguing and fussing. And I said, oh my God, I ain't never seen nothing like this. And I was just curious. I said, this the way it always happened? They said, yeah. I said, oh man, this is nice, man. I mean, it's like you could pull up a lawn chair and just sit back and say, oh, okay, all right, that's all right. And we were out, the first one I came to, man, we were out, I think about 2 or 3. I was shocked. I said, oh my goodness, that's it? They said, yep, that's it. Well, the last one we had, I think we were here. I know it was dark when it was over. That's all I remember. I don't even remember the time, but it was late. But hopefully we go back to normal.
Making a smooth process.
Yeah, a smooth process, and we need to learn that we can disagree without being outrageously disagreeable, and take care of the Lord's business. That's my prayer and desire.
I'm sorry, I got to put this little joke up there from Karen.
I've been in sessions where we started Saturday night and got out Sunday afternoon.
Oh, someone said, would we consider a 2-day process? I don't even know if the delegates would want that. But you guys,
Yeah, because most of them have to go back to work. So, and then who's going to foot the bill for the extra day?
okay. All right, I'm just scanning. I know we're not going to be able to get to every question because we're already past our time. But there was another one because, there's some catchphrases that we hear at the session. Point of order. Someone's yelling out point of order and all these things. What does that mean? And, who's calling it? Why are they calling it? What happens when they call it point of order? Because sometimes I wonder if it's being used appropriately.
Okay, a point of order is supposed to bring up an issue that I'm going to pull it up from the General Conference rules. So the purpose is to object to a decision or ruling of the chair at the time it is made regarding a point of order, or to relieve the chair from making the decision. And that is to say, the chair made a decision, I want to send the report back. No, we're not going to send the report back. Point of order, I move that we send the report back. Then they have to, the second, it's not debatable. You have to vote it up or down and go from there.
Okay, that's good. So it's addressed to the chair of the session. Okay, gotcha.
Right.
All right, cool. Thank you. Anything else, gentlemen? Because I know we have all kinds of questions. Is there anything else you just want to make sure that those listening know about the session that we haven't covered yet that you feel is vitally important?
Well, I think it's vitally important to continue the dialogue with your area delegates, pastors, people who represent you on the various committees and things, to get information, to get clarity about information. I think it would be good if an area wants their delegates educated more on the General Conference Rules of Order, that you contact Elder Doggette and see if he would have a session with your delegates to give them basic rules of protocol when you're in a meeting. How do you make a motion? How do you object? How do you go forth and put forth a concern you have? I think these things we need to try to do ahead of time. Our bylaws committee is committed to some of these proposed changes. We plan to have a Zoom session where we can share with the conference and hopefully dealing with different areas or north and south region where we go over the proposed changes with people. You don't even have to be a delegate. You just be a member. You need to be educated on what's happening or what's being proposed. And then that way you can voice your concern to your representative concerning that proposed change so they can represent you well. So we want full participation and engagement, and we're trying to do all in our powers to make that happen. I think this would be the first time the bylaws committee is reaching out to the constituents before the session. It was always our intent to do so, but I think this time we will reach that goal to share the proposed changes with the delegates and constituents before the session. And hopefully we get feedback before we get to the session so we can consider most changes. It's very few that, we're still getting some that coming forth that are new, but most proposed changes we have heard. But like I say, The committee is willing to listen to each constituent in Allegheny East Conference, how they feel the direction this conference should go according to its governing document, which is the bylaws.
And I will put myself out there. I'm available for any church or any group of delegates that would like to ascertain or obtain my services. That's why I'm here to serve. I would also say that your pastor is probably your first source of information actually in your church. If you're a delegate, it would be helpful if pastors would meet with those delegates and go over the agenda, tell them what to expect, get a copy of the General Conference Rules of Order. Everybody just kind of get an orientation so they know how to conduct themselves during the service. But I'll be happy to help in any way that I can.
And speaking of which, we have recorded part 1 of the orientation with Dr. Robinson that's currently on our website for delegates, delegates and constituents, helping you understand the process and your role, your rights and privileges as a delegate. You can check that out on our website, visit ac.org. And then we're also going to have a part 2 where Attorney Doggette will also be going over some of those parliamentary procedures and other things that we've discussed tonight or didn't get to. So those will also be available for you to view on demand prior to the session. So, all right, guys. Yes.
I was just going to personally thank Dr. Robinson and
great answers
and Attorney Doggette for the level of clarity. I think when people don't understand, they are ignorant at the session. They make snap decisions. They get emotional, and without clarity, that it kind of breeds that kind of confusion. So I want to thank both of you for offering this clarity. I don't believe I've ever seen this level of discussion and clarity before a session before, and I've been at a few. And it's our intent to inform Upset podcast listeners and the conference at large. So thank you both for your level of
thank
clarity.
you.
Agreed.
Thank you.
Agreed.
Yeah, a raise. Yes. Amen.
Thank you. I want to say thank you to Upset Podcast. You made this possible, and you ought to be commended. Again, that's why thank God for our communications director, our media director, and those who work with your team. We appreciate the work you do, and we couldn't turn you down because we love you. We support what you're doing, and you tricked me into watching one of your podcasts, and it worked. And it worked. And it worked because I think this is a good way for people to get the information they need, and it's enjoyable. And you guys do a great job, and you ought all to be. The whole team is to be commended. God bless you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you. Really appreciate that. Yes, thank you both for this wonderful wealth of information that you've shared. We know that it's a lot going on around this time, so we appreciate you carving out the time to be with us this evening and for answering all the questions that we could get to. All right, and don't forget to check out those orientation videos. Part 1 is already up on our website, visit ac.org, and part 2 will be up by the second week of September. All right, everyone. Thank you so much. Be sure to share this, guys. As you're watching now, after you get off, just share the link, whether you're watching on YouTube or Facebook, so that more people can learn about this process. We'd appreciate it. But for now, we say good night and we say thank you. Have a great week, everybody.
Much thanks. Thank you, gentlemen.
God bless Allegheny East Conference.
That's right.